Hello again, AP people. Welcome back for document of the day number 2. Today's document is really going to focus in on progressive reforms and reformers. So we're going to be talking about a selection from a muckraking journalist and progressive right at the turn of the century. The novel itself doesn't necessarily achieve the goals of its author, but it definitely makes way for some really important progressive reforms. The hallmarks of progressive reformers are identifying a problem in society, using science to devise solutions for those problems, so using a really orderly method to create a solution, and pushing for reforms, either at the municipal, state, or federal level. Okay, so those three things come together really to mark the efforts of progressive reformers. Right, so today I'm going to be talking about Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, not to be confused with The Jungle Book at all. So this is published in 1906 by Upton Sinclair, who is a socialist, muckraking progressive. And he writes the novel about a Lithuanian family who immigrates as part of the wave of new immigrants from Eastern Europe to Chicago, and most of the family members end up working in relation to the Chicago stockyards in some form or fashion. Right? So Sinclair's purpose in writing was to show the intense poverty and struggle that these immigrant families were dealing with, and to promote some socialist reforms dealing with poverty. What ultimately happens, as he puts it, he aims for the public's heart and instead accidentally hits them in the stomach. The public is really shook by his descriptions of the meatpacking industry, and they're concerned about what's in the food, right? And largely as a result of public outcry after reading this work, Congress sends out researchers to see what's really happening in the stockyards, and those researchers find that what Sinclair is writing about is mostly accurate, minus a few salacious details. And Congress decides to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. Both of those come out of Teddy Roosevelt's administration, and they're part of the reason he's usually associated with progressive reform. So I want to read you just a selection from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. This is from chapter 14. With one member trimming beef in a cannery and another working in a sausage factory, the family had a first-hand knowledge of the great majority of packing town swindles, for it was the custom, as they found, whenever meat was so spoiled that it could not be used for anything else, either to can it or else to chop it up into sausage. With what had been told them by Jonas, who had worked in the pickle rooms, they could now study the whole of the spoiled meat industry on the inside, and read a new and grim meaning into that old packing town jest that they use everything of the pig except the squeal. Jonas had told them how the meat that was taken out of pickle would often be found sour, and how they would rub it up with soda to take away the smell, and sell it to be eaten on free lunch counters. Also of all the miracles of chemistry which they performed, giving to any sort of meat, fresh or salted, whole or chopped, any color and any flavor and any odor they chose. In the pickling of hams they had an ingenious apparatus by which they saved time and increased the capacity of the plant, a machine consisting of a hollow needle attached to a pump. By plunging this needle into the meat and working with his foot, a man could fill a ham with pickle in a few seconds. And yet, in spite of this, there would be hams found spoiled, some of them with an odor so bad that a man could hardly bear to be in the room with them. To pump into these, the packers had a second and much stronger pickle, which destroyed the odor, a process known to the workers as giving them 30%. Also, after the hams had been smoked, there would be found some that had gone to the bad. Formerly, these had been sold as number 3 grade, but later on some ingenious person had hit upon a new device, and now they would extract the bone, about which the bad part generally lay, and insert in the hole a white-hot iron. After this invention, there was no longer number 1, 2, and 3 grade, there was only number 1 grade. The packers were always originating such schemes. They had what they called boneless hams, which were all the odds and ends of pork stuffed into casings, and California hams, which were the shoulders with big knuckle joints, and nearly all the meat cut out, and fancy skinned hams, which were made of the oldest hogs, whose skins were so heavy and coarse that no one would buy them, that is, until they had been cooked and chopped fine and labeled head cheese. It was only when the whole ham was spoiled that it came into the department of Elzbieta. Cut up by the 2,000 revolutions a minute flyers and mixed with half a ton of other meat, no odor that ever was in a ham could make any difference. There was never the least attention paid to what was cut up for sausage. There would come all the way back from Europe old sausage that had been rejected, and that was moldy and white. It would be doused with borax and glycerin and dumped into the hoppers, and made over again for home consumption. There would be meat that had tumbled out on the floor, in the dirt and sawdust, where the workers had tramped and spit uncounted billions of consumption germs. There would be meat stored in great piles in rooms, and the water from leaky roofs would drip over it, and thousands of rats would race about on it. It was too dark in these storage places to see well, but a man could run his hand over these piles of meat and sweep off handfuls of the dried dung of rats. These rats were nuisances, and the packers would put poisoned bread out for them. They would die, and then rats, bread, and meat would go into the hoppers together. This is no fairy story and no joke. The meat would be shoveled into carts, and the man who did the shoveling would not trouble to lift out a rat even when he saw one. There were things that went into the sausage, in comparison with which a poisoned rat was a tidbit. There was no place for the men to wash their hands before they ate their dinner, and so they made a practice of washing them in the water that was to be ladled into the sausage. There were the butt ends of smoked meat, and the scraps of corned beef, and all the odds and ends of the waste of the plants, that would be dumped into old barrels in the cellar and left there. Under the system of rigid economy which the packers enforced, there were some jobs that it only paid to do once in a long time, and among these was the cleaning out of the waste barrels. Every spring they did it, and in the barrels would be dirt and rust and old nails and stale water, and cartload after cartload of it would be taken up and dumped into the hoppers with fresh meat and sent out to the public's breakfast. Some of it they would make into smoked sausage, but as the smoking took time and was therefore expensive, they would call upon their chemistry department and preserve it with borax and cover it with gelatin to make it brown. All of their sausage came out of the same bowl, but when it came time to wrap it, they would stamp some of it special, and for this they would charge 2 cents more a pound. That's all for today. Thanks, guys. See you later.